And now we've definitely mentioned the wider economic value of data. It's now time to turn its social benefit to empower individuals and communities and learn how to promote a safe, fair, legal, and equitable sharing of data to address data governance. To do so, our next panel is joining us live and fully online. I'm joined right here, right now. Or maybe we need a jingle, sure. And I'll be really happy to discover our next guest online, Dr. Jenny Tennyson from the Open Data. Because I mean, white chairs are not that, really expressive. If I can actually have, our distinguished guests who are definitely waiting for us online, that would be way better than anything. So Dr. Jenny Tennyson from the Open Data Institute in the UK. Dr. Meja Bogotaj-Jenček, founder and head of the Intellectual Property Institute in Slovenia. Neil Lawrence, the professor of machine learning at the University of Cambridge, of course, in the UK. And Alison Gilwood, executive director at ICT Africa. I would love to have actually the video of my guest. Thank you so much, just to make sure that you're all here awake and happy to be with us this morning to dive into this very crucial question of data governance. Jenny and Maja, you're both the co-chairs of this working group. The mic is yours for an overview of its vision.
So thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We are delighted to present on the progress of our data governance working group. To be more efficient to do that, just please let me know whether the slides are up.
Let me check. Okay, this is the morning. We're definitely warming up. If we can get our first slide, that would be wonderful. And yep, the slide is ready.
Okay, great. Welcome everyone, and I will just give the mic to my wonderful co-chair Jenny Tennyson that I'm really enjoying cooperate with. I've been learning so much from her. So Jenny, the mic is yours.
Thanks so much, Maya. It's lovely to see you and lovely to be here. Hi, everyone. So yes, once again, we've been blown away this year by the fantastic creativity and commitment of all our wonderful colleagues on the working group. And we've been delighted too by the enthusiasm our projects have received from GPAI's member governments. In particular, some additional funding we've received for them from the UK government.
So that's why we are even more privileged to present you our two projects that we prioritize for this term of our work. We took some time to collect ideas, prioritize, and develop within the working group, but then we chose two projects. The first focuses on supporting the creation of real-world data trusts as institutions that could enable safe and equitable data sharing for social benefits and empower individuals to enact their data right. The second project aims to advance research and practice on data justice. This project provides a framework for data justice research and practice and includes considerations of justice in terms of access to representation and transparency about data use in artificial intelligence development. Please move to slide 4 now. So we have great partners and great project leadership on both projects, on both priorities. We collaborate with Cambridge Data Trust Initiative and the APT Institute and the Open Data Institute on the Data Trust project. And that project is led by Neil Lawrence and Seung-Tok Oh. And the second project, we cooperate with Alan Turing Institute, working under the leadership of working group experts, wonderful Alison Gilwood, who will present later, and Dewey Murdick. Thank you to all for great work. Please move to slide 5. So we will not stop there. We already have future plans, planned for 2022. We will be building on the progress of these two projects by adding a third one on 2022. This will be a more technical project on privacy enhancing technology, also known as PETs, to explore how these may help address some of the data related barriers to creating artificial intelligence for social good. So like our first project, the PETS project will pursue a practical goal to scope and plan and design a case, a candidate for demonstration of these technologies. Our goal is that this demonstration will help us shape practical guidance for the community. So please listen to our presentation and also like feel addressed with invitation to join and contact us back on all those projects. Now back to you, Jenny.
Thanks, Maya. And I'm just actually going to hand over to hear more from the project leads on those two projects Maya outlined. But I did want to take the opportunity to say a massive thank you again to our working group for all of the commitment and creativity and good humour that you've shared with us that has been really made this possible. And also a big shout out for the amazing support that we've received from the team at Semia, and most particularly Ed Tether. But we'll hand over now to Neil to tell you more about data trust, and then Alison will speak more on data justice. So Neil, over to you.
Thanks, Jenny, and thanks, Maya, and thanks for all the work you've done making it such a pleasant group to attend. Can we go to slide 6, please? I don't actually get to see the slides, so it'd be great to put the slides alongside me so I can just see where we are. Okay, while you're doing that, I'm pleased to speak today about our data trust project. Before I start, I did want to say a really huge thank you to my co-chair, Seong Tak, and other members of the working group, and particular thanks to Jess Montgomery, who's provided an immense amount of support in convening and structuring the group. So progress in AI requires access to data. And data sharing brings benefits, but also exposes our digital selves. From the use of social media for targeted advertising to influence us, to the use of genetic data to identify criminals or natural family members, a greater variety of data about us are being gathered and used. Control of our virtual selves maps onto control of our actual selves. The way in which data about us is used can shape our daily lives in ways that we might not be fully aware of. So how do we reap the benefits of new data-enabled technologies without sacrificing our agency or exposing ourselves to other new vulnerabilities? Data stewardship offers an important lever in shaping how AI technologies develop, influencing who shares data, for what purpose, and for whose benefit, can direct technological development towards outcomes that are more or less, depending on the direction of travel, beneficial to individuals and society. This leads to the question, what forms of data stewardship can enable data sharing for social benefit while redressing the power imbalances in the digital environment that create many of the vulnerabilities or harms we've seen as a result of data misuse and use? Move to slide 7, please. As we transition to an environment in which more data that pertains to individuals is used in different ways, the old boundaries between personal and non-personal data are fading, raising new questions about who has what rights over which data and how they can implement those rights. We can think about rivers as an analogy for this environment. In Sheffield, where I used to live, work, run and cycle, the small mills that supported local knife makers were driven by water power flowing from Houndkirk Moor to the centre of town. Different mills on the river had different rights to the water. If an upstream mill dams the entire flow, the downstream mill has to stop working in times of drought. The rivers of Sheffield are streams, but as they flow down into nearby rivers, new rights to this water emerge. As well as power from the river, there is its use as a source of drinking water, for navigation, and for irrigation. Many of these rights are in tension. Mills working on the river may pollute the stream. If the water is dammed or used for irrigation, then it can be too low for navigation. there is complex interplay of demands on the river that creates tensions between different users. Many of the rights we have today in relation to data about us, in areas where those rights exist in the first instance, come from data protection legislation. The system that is implied by current data protection legislation has significant power asymmetries at its heart, in that the data controller has a duty of care over the data subject, but the data subject may only discover failings in that duty of care when it's too late. Data trusts are a potential solution to this problem by providing a forum for negotiating data rights and responsibilities in new ways. Data trusts are a type of data institution that supports individuals or groups to pool resources, tasking an independent trustee to manage those resources for the benefit of the trust's members. The trustee's responsibility was entirely to the members of the trust. How data is handled would be subject to the terms under which the trust is convened. The success of an individual trust would be contingent on satisfying its members. Slide 8, please. One of the distinctive features of a data trust, in contrast with other types of data intermediary, is the concept of bottom-up engagement. Data trusts should be able to offer a vehicle for individuals or groups to choose how they want their data about them to be used, engaging a trustee to make decisions about data use on their behalf. To achieve this goal, there is a set of functions that data trusts must deliver. In July this year, GPAI's Data Governance Working Group published its consensus statement on data trusts, summarizing these functions. Beyond these functions, understanding of how to design and operate data trusts are in flux. So slide 9 now. Oh no, you're on slide 9 already. To help understand current strategies for operationalizing data trusts, GPAI has commissioned the APTI Institute and the Open Data Institute to produce 2 new reports now published for consultation. A survey of current data trust projects by the ODI and APTI Institute collates experiences from 45 practitioners and researchers, presenting their views on what functions data trusts are delivering and what operational strategies help deliver them. These individual findings show that while the last few years might have been characterized by a proliferation of projects using the term data trust in different ways, the community is moving towards a shared understanding of what data trusts are and how they differ from other forms of stewardship. In support of the functions set out earlier, a range of different innovations in stewardship practice are being deployed by these projects, including different legal frameworks, technologies, business models, and forms of engagement. These are delivering many of the core functions of data trusts. One area that remains challenging for projects is developing the role of data trustees and understanding their role in implementing the fiduciary responsibilities associated with data trusts. With trustees expected to play an important role in increasing accountability and enforcing safeguards around data use, this gap has implications for how data trusts can work today and how the field might develop in future. The APTI Institute's review of legal frameworks synthesizes recent legal and policy developments surrounding data trusts. They point to 3 policy building blocks for data trusts. Data rights and protections. Data trusts are a tool to help citizens enact their rights. A prerequisite for their operationalization is the existence of clear and robust data rights within a jurisdiction. These might include individual data rights like portability, but in future may need to go further, extending to rights around community data or co-generated data. Data sharing policies. A range of different legal agreements and frameworks play a role in supporting data sharing, including standards, sector-specific regulations, or data formats. The ability of data trusts to facilitate data use will depend in part on the effectiveness of this wider environment. Fiduciary obligations. Under common law, fiduciary duties would require data trustees to act in the best interests of the trust members. In other jurisdictions, different strategies will be needed to implement such requirements, ensuring data trusts remain trustworthy. On to slide 10, please. Together, these interim reviews show both the progress that has been made in advancing data trust research and practice over the last 5 years, and the progress that is needed to operationalize the vision behind data trusts. Making further progress from theory to practice will require policymakers and practitioners to grapple with questions such as, what have we learned about what works in terms of operational strategies for data trusts? What data rights and data sharing infrastructures must be in place to enable data trusts to operate? Where legal interventions are not available, what alternative strategies can work in their place? What interventions help ensure that data trusts remain trustworthy? Our working group will continue to explore these issues and the practical development of data trusts in areas aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular relating to climate action, throughout 2022. Next slide, please. We hope we can start a conversation with the data trust community, and I'm looking forward to hearing your questions and comments today. I'll pass over to Alison now to speak about our work on data justice.
Thank you so much, Neil, and lovely to be here, and also just great synergies between the data justice and data trust project. So very nice segue into what we need to speak about. And I'm going to be speaking about our data justice project with all of you today, and really wish to acknowledge the enormous amount of time and effort that the co-lead, Dewey Murdoch, has put into this, our co-chairs, of course, and a number of the smaller working groups that have worked on getting the project underway. So some of you will know that data justice is an emerging concept that a number of entities have been contributing to over the past few years in an effort in the context of AI to move beyond notions of just beneficial or responsible AI, ethics by design, and to really look at some of the issues of equality, justice, and redress. For the purposes of this work, we define data justice as fairness in the way people are made visible, represented, and treated as a result of their production of digital data, encompassing notions from political rights and justice through to social and economic equity. Whilst current rights protecting frameworks on data tend to focus heavily on privacy and on data protection, a broader view shaped by data justice takes into account various factors. These include considerations of how benefits, harms, and risks can be mastered for the marginalization alongside the privileged. A focus on positive as well as negative rights, with the positive rights including data sovereignty, access to it, access to data, its quality, its usability, and its integrity. A collective view of rights or group identities that augments the individualized view dominant within current privacy frameworks. And specifically, this seeks to nuance understandings of indigenous community rights and the tensions of some of those protecting, safeguarding community rights with open data and other what are perceived as positive policy frameworks. Data input and output in AI, particularly in relation to invisibility, to representational bias and discrimination. And then there are the issues of more even cross-border flows and open data that promote greater inclusion and participation by those currently marginalized. And what we're trying to do through all of this is, or achieve this, is by enabling North-South and greater South-South collaboration and participation. For this project, we wanted to understand the state of the art of the field and also explore ways of translating those insights into practical guidance and guiding questions that can be applied on a day-to-day basis by 3 target audiences that we've identified. Those are policymakers, developer communities, and communities marginalized and individuals marginalized by AI and machine learning systems. It was particularly important too for this project that this work is rooted in the perspective of low and middle income countries, both for the project to meet its aims and in the light of GPAI's commitment to take special account of the majority of the world's population that are in these countries and their needs. If we could move to slide 13. After a competitive selection process in which we weighted Global South participation, we have partnered with the Alan Turing Institute to develop 2 outputs. The first is an integrated literature review and annotated bibliography to provide much needed context and identify gaps that need to be filled as we move towards a more complete view of data justice and a forward-looking research agenda to capture all these complexities. But what we are trying to do is also reduce some of this complexity and produce some preliminary guides that will document key questions that our target audiences, developer community, policymakers, and communities and individuals that are marginalized, should be asking based on the assessment of the critical review of the literature and practice. So we're going to get these simplified guides from these very complex processes and hope to capture some of the granularity and the nuances of that. These are going to be tested and refined and developed through practical pilots in real-world contexts and, of course, in broad consultation with our target audiences. If we could move to slide 14. So, drawing on the working group's concept note, the interim report that the Alan Turing Institute has presented in the summit documents that have been provided includes this broad approach that the literature review has taken, or the refined approach that the literature review has taken, the wider global partnerships and consultation approach we're establishing to developing and testing the emerging guides, and then 6 provisional pillars that are structuring the approach to this project. The integrated literature review has been shaped by an interdisciplinary and inclusive orientation that draws widely on the humanities, social sciences, legal and policy literatures, activist statements and declarations, and first-hand input in lived experiences. To understand then what is missing and can enrich the current study and understanding of data justice, the review ranges well beyond conventional boundaries and incorporates adjacent research areas such as design justice, data feminism, data colonialism, and indigenous data sovereignty. It's also developing an important aspect of economic regulation required by the brief for the working group to move beyond injustices only as the treatment of data subjects, but also to redress the uneven distribution of opportunities and harms to ensure greater equity in access to data and the production of data in the creation of data-driven private and public value. The review also undertakes a broadening of the study and pursuit of data justice by making visible and accessible real-world practices of organizations and communities around the world which are engaged in this transformative work surrounding the advancement of data rights and data justice in innovation ecosystems. If we could move to slide 15. So the stakeholder involvement, engagement, and consultation is a crucial element of this project, culminating in the development and early testing of these preliminary guides with these 3 target audiences that we've spoken about. We are undertaking this 3-pronged approach, which will include firstly, or includes already, the launch of a digital participatory platform for stakeholder engagement. The platform contains 2 types of consultation, a broader data justice survey and a data justice sources page, which allows participants to endorse content and to leave comments and propose themes for the integrated literature review. The second prong is the formation of an advisory board of academics and practitioners from the Global South to assist the Turing Institute research team better connect with data justice communities of practice and relevant stakeholders from primarily low but also middle income countries. So this advisory board is composed of individuals involved in various data communities of practice connected to human rights, modern slavery, global public health, feminism, decolonization of knowledge resources, and of course, sustainable development. It represents diverse perspectives from the Global South and those of communities and that have experienced marginalization in the global north. The advisory board provides an additional source of guidance over and above the GPAI Data Justice Working Group, who've worked very closely with them with a particular focus on supporting their outreach efforts within a variety of research and practice environments. The third part is the formation of a global policy pilot partnership. This is a very exciting addition we've been able to do with the additional funding, and that really allows us to set up these 12 policy pilot partners who've been recruited, again, primarily from low but also middle income countries across the globe, global south, and some parts in between, the project to take this to do this pilot phase. The data justice guidelines will then be tested by the set of representative partner organizations who will provide feedback on the initial guides. The goal is for these partners to evaluate the preliminary guides to further develop its efficacy and the impact it would have on organizational, legal, technical, and regulatory contexts. If we could move to slide 16. So there's 6 provisional pillars that have emerged, and we see this in the current literature, and are summarized to inform our conceptual approach to the project. And these have kind of coalesced around issues of concepts of power, equity, access, identity, participation, and knowledge. Each of these act as guiding principles and pose questions as we think about what they mean for policymakers, developer communities, and marginalized communities. So, for example, when we think about power, how do we understand the levels at which power operates in data innovation? And do we empower people within that democratic within that to have democratic agency and collective will? When we think about equity, acknowledging the structural inequalities between and within nations that exclude the vast majority of the world's population from the opportunities offered by data-driven private and public value, and that produce the current patterns of exclusion, misrepresentation, and discrimination that we currently witness. How can policymakers, developers, and individuals and communities contribute to redressing inequality and enabling just outcomes in the development and deployment of AI? When we think about access, how does existing power, or how are existing power relations within and between nations, communities, and individuals that replicate inequitable access, how can these be redressed? Data justice thinking needs to focus on greater access to systems of global governance and more inclusive participation in decision-making and practice at the global, regional, and national level. So practically, these guides will assist with this requirement. Practically, what we need to do is look at equitably opening access to data through responsible data sharing, equitable advancing access to research and innovation capacity by those currently excluded or limited, equitably advancing access to the benefits of data work, for example, highly unequal as it currently is, and more equitable advancing of access to the capabilities required to use and to develop AI to improve livelihoods and for data subjects to mitigate risk and avoid harms. And then when we think about identity, the construction of data, particularly when it is about people, is fundamentally a social activity. As such, it is shaped by structural conditions and historical contexts from which it's derived. How do we examine, expose, and critique histories of racialization and discriminatory systems of categorization reflected in data and the social context that produces it? When we think about participation, how do we make this meaningful and representative? How can the interests of low and middle income groups countries better be reflected in global systems of data governance, and their integration into global markets be made more equitable? And finally, just because we've got to close this off somewhere, there is a lot here to discuss. When we think about knowledge, how do we cultivate intercultural sharing and learning, and understand how different ways of understanding are reflected in decision-making relating to data? How do we encourage opening public and private data for research and innovation while safeguarding indigenous knowledge systems and the use of vulnerable people's data? If we could move to slide 17. So by March 2022, we'll be publishing preliminary guides. For policymakers, the guides will focus on posing questions which equip policy thinking and tools to engage in debates about global data governance, with a critical awareness of power differentials and diverging levels of access, equity, and participation. It will focus on the economic regulation required to enable better distribution of opportunities for citizens, small and medium micro enterprises and local firms and startups, and the mitigation of the differential risk associated with expanding data-driven technologies, platforms, and services. For developers, the guide will focus on posing questions which equip researchers, project managers, technologists, and others involved in data innovation value chain with the practical and analytical tools needed to safeguard the ethics and the trustworthiness of processes of designing, developing, procuring, and deploying AI and data-intensive technologies, so as to ensure that more just outcomes in real-world implementation. This will involve building an end-to-end awareness into research and innovation practices that every human choice and design decision made across the project life cycle has social and ethical consequences. For the impacted individuals and communities, which is what the third guide will focus on, we will be posing questions which empower affected individuals and groups with the critical, analytical, and practical tools needed to challenge and transform the socio-historically rooted patterns of discrimination, injustice, and inequality that can manifest in the production and use of data-driven or data-intensive technologies, and of course, just the wider processes of datafication. Following the pillars, it will also enable individuals and communities to utilize mechanisms of collective empowerment, social solidarity, and democratic agency to create conditions of public accountability and transparency in the governance of AI and in data-intensive technologies and in the wider innovation ecosystem, data innovation ecosystem. We can move to slide 18.
Alison, actually, let me stop you for a second out here. This is Marjorie back on stage in Paris. It seems that we're experiencing some Zoom syndrome out here. It's still 2021. So if I can ask one of you to mute herself or himself, or maybe if our producers can actually directly mute this person, that would be wonderful, because I can hear someone typing. Neil, it was you from the very beginning. We can hear some doors clacking. We can hear someone typing on his or her computer and everything. So it's kind of disturbing to us.
We have no ability to...
We're having this Zoom moment together. No worries. Let's dive in, Alison, for the next slides.
That's okay. I had mine on mute when Neil was talking because my dog was snoring so loudly. So
there you go.
I'll just quickly before it starts snoring again. If we're on slide 18, this is really just an appeal for everyone to get involved. These guides are meant to be practical. They're meant to be used. People can input into them and test them. Most of you fall into one of these categories, these very broad categories that we're aiming these guides to. So please do get in touch with us if you can think of ways of becoming involved or you're interested in getting involved. And finally, just very quickly to the last slide, we were almost done there when we stopped. Just thank you so much to everybody who's participated on this, all the hard work that's been done by various people. And thank you, and back to our moderator. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much again. And actually, we have time. If either Maja or Jenny have something to add before we move on to our Q&A session, just raise your hand, and I know that you know. Okay, well, let's proceed to the Q&A now. So either we can take a question here, of course, here in Paris, or you can definitely post your question online. I'll be happy to be your spokesperson on this session. We do have questions actually here in this auditorium. I can see one hand raising, and I see one, and also like literally running to pass the mic on. So who has a mic right now? Just raise your hand if you have a mic, because I can see you guys. Okay, Okay, I know that you definitely have the mic, but I have one guest over there who actually wants to ask a question. Wonderful. Oh, Days too. We love you. It's always warming up, for the second part of the summit. There you go. Question, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. A great presentation and great ideas. I have a question about data trust. They relate to interoperability, to the quality of data, which is key, of course, because you don't want to pollute the whole river. So what are the concrete measures that you envisage in this to guarantee this? Another side question, can a data owner be member of several trusts? And could we, over time, witness some competition between trusts? I mean, this happens in industry, of course, as well in general. So it wouldn't be really something that we look forward to have a kind of competition and harsh competition between different data trusts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Maybe Neil first on the data trusts competition.
So I think actually the alternative situation is more worrisome. If there's one data trust that is supposed to be operating for everyone, then you've got a one-size-fits-all approach. And the problem we tend to have is people imposing an idea of what they believe data justice is on others. So competition sort of implies, oh, you've got people going at each other in a cutthroat way, but having a variety of options of data trusts and different visions of what the right way of equitably managing data is a core part of the idea. Because the way in which you may want to manage, say, health data versus data for a local government about transport is going to be very different. And different cultures across the world will have different views about how they would like their data to be managed. So when you say competition, it sounds like they're going at each other to get the data. But if you convert it to actually we want a diversity of approaches that gives people choice and influence about how their data is managing, then I think that would be something that we're very interested in.
Thank you very much. And for the first part of the question, who wants to address the very first question of our attendee here? And maybe he will have to remind us about the very first part of his question, though.
I'm happy to, if you'd like. So the first part of the question was about how we get guarantees of quality around the data that a data trust holds and is sharing. And really that's part of the responsibility of what a data trust or broader data institution might need to do. As part of the kinds of guarantees that it then passes on for the reusers of that data, it will need to provide some guarantees about quality around the provenance of the data that it's sharing and so on. So what we expect to emerge as kind of good practices are a set of kind of good stewardship guidance that illustrates the kinds of things that kind of organization needs to do in terms of checking, auditing, and being able to provide good, transparent information about the quality of data that it holds.
Thank you very much. Do we have another question or reaction to this very working group, data governance, and all the projects we're working on, data trusts or data justice? I actually do have a question for you, Alison, because can you make it a little clearer to me? Maybe it's just me personally, but the difference about data justice and data protection, is that, are they that far? Oh, and you muted yourself. I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
There you go.
That's that's a great question. A lot of the data governance work has been equated with data protection. The sort of dominance of the GDPR. Even in the African context, the Malabo Convention, a lot of the data governance work has become synonymous with data protection, which is actually just a kind of small part of data governance, a significant part, but a smaller part of data governance. And it's primarily focused on quite individualized notions of privacy basically with from a governance or regulatory point of view, from a compliance point of view. So, companies, people, data, AI developers in this case, need to ensure that the private data of people that's used is anonymized, or not, their privacy isn't breached. Whereas the issue of data governance really extends beyond that to how do we manage all this data, these data sets and these kinds of things. Within that, the concept of data justice is that even if you've got these compliance frameworks, these data protection frameworks in place, if you simply impose those on the status quo, and you have highly unequal societies within societies, different groups of peoples and communities, etc., it doesn't redress the inequalities that are reflected in data sets that are biased. People simply aren't visible in the large majority of the world are not even in any data sets, and then those that are their biases in terms of race or gender or various things in the data. So data justice really goes beyond data protection to try and redress some of the inequities there. And then I think, interestingly, what we're doing in terms of this project, which extends it from some of the earlier data justice work that has focused mainly on the rights and representation and kind of democratic or first generation around rights imperatives of data governance. This is really also focused on the second and third generation rights, the social and economic rights, and arguing that, in fact, we have to look to economic regulation to ensure greater equity and access to data, greater equity, in data flows, and these kinds of things. So I think this is what is really exciting about this project of data justice, is that it extends it beyond the first generation rights to actually enabling people's participation, greater equity in access, and also being able to mitigate the risks and harms that they face.
Thank you very much for making this way more clear. We do have another question actually on the top over there in the auditorium, then we'll get back to you. Ma'am.
Thank you. So my question would be on the access to this data trust. So basically, if someone would comply with the licenses, let's say, you would give them access to anyone. I mean, it's the big question, and IP pools is friend, fair, reasonable, non-discriminatory accesses. Would this be replicated for data? So this was the first question. The other would be, would there be some obligations for the people who are using the data? So I'm thinking, for instance, cities giving away their data on traffic, but they don't get back anything on the insides, for instance, to make a better traffic management. So would there be like a new social contract? You get the data, but you give something back on what you learned about the data.
Who wants to address this double question?
I think there's quite a common confusion with data trusts that it's a mechanism for forming governance mechanisms. So all the questions you asked are specific to how one may want to set up data trusts. And people keep making this error that a data trust is a one-size-fits-all thing that everyone will have. That's down to the data trustees to decide and to work with the community that they're interfacing with, how that's going to be carried out, because the appropriate measures are going to vary, because data reflects every aspect of our lives. We wouldn't want to be treated in exactly the same way by our greengrocer as we are by our doctor or our lawyer. So the whole point is it's a mechanism for creating safe structures that encode behaviors, encode practices that where you have some kind of framework around those practices to ensure that the trustees carry them out. And it's interesting how often this comes up. Will a data trust do this? Well, it could do that. The whole point is you've got a way in which people can design a mechanism of governance that's appropriate to the situation they care about and regulate data in a way that's appropriate to the people that the members of that trust care about.
Thank you very much. I think we have a question pending over there.
Yes, thank you. There is a rather recent movement on data altruism, which is some kind of intermediate model between the commercial data distribution and fully open data. And what you have presented in these two reports is related to data altruism rather significantly. But I wonder whether the GPAI is going to specifically address this issue in the next future, especially because the European Commission, for example, is planning to put a regulation or at least to put recommendation on the subject.
Okay, I can take that. So the notion of data altruism is that we want to encourage individuals to put data somewhere, and the way we would frame it is into some kind of data institution or data trust, such that it can then be used for kind of public good purposes. So whether that's research or supporting public authorities to make planning decisions or whatever. So we definitely see the work that we're doing around data trusts as being very tied to that notion of data altruism and data altruism kind of organizations. And the mechanisms that we're exploring around data trusts, in particular, the role of trustees and the fiduciary duties that they have, the kind of stewardship mechanisms that they need to put into place. These are going to be very relevant when it comes to actually practically getting data altruism to work.
Thank you very much. We do have another question from Dino Pedreschi, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you. I am actually a follow-up question to this one, which is about what kind of architecture do you imagine behind this data trust idea, which is, of course, is very nice. In a sense that one line that we would like to avoid is to find another way of creating big concentration of very precious personal data that would require anyhow explicit consent, at least in Europe, for the GDPR, for any secondary use. So my question is, are you considering that behind this there's a highly distributed maybe data infrastructure where actually data don't, for instance, leave the user's devices? They're not concentrated anyway and only on purpose for a specific project, because I believe this would be very important to create a model which is not somehow running towards the hyper-centralized model that we are trying to somehow regulate today.
That's a great question, Dino. I think that it's important first to not tie regulation to particular technologies. I think that's something that is very important, because the speed at which technology moves versus regulation is quite different. So the point you're making about distributed data is a good one, and there's definitely personal information management systems, and it seems clear that a lot of the trusts that we're working with are viewing personal information management systems as a route to addressing exactly the issue that you're mentioning. And you can imagine that in the constituent terms of the trust that they might specify that they will use a particular personal information management system. But to be prescriptive might seem an error, because there's in a real sense, it seems that the right way to view this is not the data that's held by the trust, but the rights to the data. So you could also imagine, for example, a data trust that was convened by a large number of people, where it chose not to hold the data, but just execute on those rights to that data. So in other words, it might execute the sort of right to deletion for a large social media company if it felt that social media company was not conforming with the desires of its members. It might just say to the social media company, we're exercising the right to deletion on our members' behalf. And such an organization wouldn't have to hold any data. So you can see from the extremes, and then you could also imagine them holding the data in a centralized way, which would raise the problems that you're mentioning. But once again, it doesn't feel necessary to prescribe that within the sort of regulatory conditions through which you're creating a data trust. It feels like that's something that individual trusts can think about for their specific purposes. And that's what we're seeing with the case studies we're looking at, that they are looking at this diversity of different methods.
One thing that I'll just quickly add onto that is that we mentioned the new project that we're starting up in 2022, which is specifically around privacy enhancing technologies. And within that project, which we hope to tie into both the data trust work and the data justice work, we're going to be able to dig a little bit more into the kind of technical architectures. And it is plural, you know, there are multiple ones that could work, that might need to be deployed in order to get a data trust working really well, depending on its situation, its context, and so forth. So I just reiterate what Neil said. I think it really is about getting the right kind of design for one of these organizations, for the kind of data that it's working with, the kind of people who are supplying it, the kind of reuse that needs to be made of it, and making that work. We envision lots of these things, not just a few that are doing big things. Right?
Thank you very much. Do we have a final question for our panel? Yes, sir.
Firstly, just to say thank you to the work of the Data Governance Group. I think it's the projects are a critical contribution to the work that GPAI and others are doing. Alison, I wanted to maybe assure you, and I should say I represent the UK Information Commissioner's Office, so the information rights regulator for the UK Data Protection Authority. So, Alison, maybe assure you that I don't think there is as big a gap between information rights and data protection and data justice as you were suggesting. And in many ways, the fundamental questions around fairness, justice, ensuring that there are equitable outcomes for citizens are key aspects of what we do in our office to try and execute the obligations we have towards our citizens. But my question really to the panel is, what would really accelerate the establishment of the types of data trust that you're envisaging? What are the key factors that might help us move faster towards that moment when we can really leverage the power of data trust the way that you've been describing?
Ali, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I guess that's what we're all trying to get on top of. I think when we look historically, one of the things that we find quite inspirational, is models from the past where communities were able to come together and take these forms of actions. And of course, it's very different circumstances in each case. Like an example from the UK I'm familiar with is people gaining voting rights by land societies. So buying up large parcels of land and splitting up the land. And what we're starting to see in terms of the case studies that are coming forward is that there's sort of three main areas where they come from. One is communities trying to come together to share their data in a more equitable way. And that would be one. Another is people with a particular health concern, so specific diseases, where groups of people would like to use their data better to resolve some aspect of that disease. And then the third one that keeps coming up is waterfront developments. I don't know, where people are sort of trying to take old urban areas, old areas and convert them into new waterfront areas. What I think it would be really nice to see is additional examples like the ones that Alison was mentioning around data justice for indigenous groups, where you can also see some very different examples of how those groups might want to use their data. Because within indigenous groups, there are often some extremely interesting ways, because models of ownership are actually much more sophisticated. There are extremely interesting ways of sharing and building resource that I think we could learn a lot from. So it would be great if we could see more of those, and I'd like to see some of that coming forward. And hopefully that will come forward as we move forward with the data justice work.
Thank you very much.
Just also add, thank you. I just did want to respond because I think this is such an important discussion for information regulators. I've actually just recently been involved in the African Union's data policy framework, development of the data policy framework for Africa. And a very strong component of that is obviously leveraging the few information regulators, or a growing number of information regulators on the continent, and integrating the work better between different kinds of regulators. So, I am very aware of the fantastic efforts of information regulators, telecom regulators generally in the UK to ensure that marginalised citizens within the UK, and this project is also very concerned with marginalised people within mature economies, developed democracies, etc. But I did want to emphasize the importance of the economic regulation that I already mentioned, I won't go into, but if we're thinking increasingly of these data markets, of data value, really being driven at a global level, and we think about the very uneven distribution of opportunities and harms at the international level, it is going to require more than what is currently in most information regulators' remit. It is going to require collaboration between trade regulators or trade negotiators, between competition regulators, and national economic policy to redress these inequalities.
Thank you very much. That will be our final question before we do wrap up. Jenny, Maya, do you have one more thing in store for our audience there?
Yes, thanks so much. So I hope that everybody has enjoyed our session, and thanks so much for all of the really excellent questions that we've received. Maya, do you want to talk about the next steps?
So thank you very much. We really want to invite you again to join with us with your expertise on the project. There are many ways that you can help us. On our data trust project, we will be taking a special focus on climate to identify and design pilot use cases. So if you have a problem or if you want to contribute, please contact us. We would really like to work with you. On the project of data justice, please check our online platform on advancing data justice during ac.uk. And for the pets, we are going to put out call for proposals. And so please stay with us and follow. The focus will be on health and on climate. So we will be looking for partners. And we really want to find the real cases, real life cases, not to make imaginary ones to test our project. And for the end, I would like to say thank you to all the members of the working group. We are also welcoming to get on board new self-nominated experts and observers. And it is a great journey for me. I'm learning so much from my dear co-chair Jenny and all the wonderful leads and experts. All the hard work is done by them, as you've seen today. And for the last but not least, our working group is cooperating with Montreal Center, who is led by Jacques Rajon. He's going to start a new phase in his exciting life, and we thank him for the leadership. He led a great group, which is of great experts and fine human beings that helped to Jenny and me. Special thanks to Ed Petter, Martin Marcotte, and that was later joined by Lama Thoma and also Mario. Thank you very much, Montreal team. You are really champions for you give great support to me and Jenny. And although it's been hard work and much more time than we originally planned, the reward is to learn from superb humans and excellent experts as you are. Thank you very much. Jenny, I will give back to you.
I don't think I have anything to add to that, Maya. It's just been a huge pleasure to be able to work with this working group and with, as Maya said, the Montreal Centre, and with Maya, who's been just a fantastic partner on this journey. So thanks very much. Back to the stage.
One happy family. Thank you so much, Maya, Jenny, Neil, and Alison, for this incredible work on data governance. I guess you deserve definitely some applause.